If the hype is to be believed, we're on the cusp of the biggest change in society since the Industrial Revolution. Driven by fears of global warming, a seismic shift is taking place. Though some may question climate change, there's no doubt dramatic policies are being introduced right across the world, and they will affect all of us. For 2 years, our economic narrative has been dominated by the calamitous property crash, banking crisis and consequent toxic debt. This programme will investigate the possibility of a brighter future for Ireland through what's known as the green economy. Politicians tell us that tackling global warming is the single most important issue facing the planet. And yet, when nearly 120 of the world's leaders gathered in Copenhagen last December, chaos reigned, both inside the conference centre and out. They failed to agree on the big issue, cutting greenhouse gas emissions. Because of this, serious questions remain over the development of a global green economy and specifically the value of green technologies.
The fundamental problem is if you just want to cut carbon emissions right now, it turns out that it's pretty expensive. So it's a pretty poor way of spending resources. What you should do instead is to spend money on research and development, get better and greener technologies, and then everybody will adopt them much more.
I'd say that the future driver of growth over these next 20 or 30 or 40 years is going to be low carbon technology, energy efficient technology.
It's overwhelmingly clear that we're reaching dangerous tipping points earlier than we thought we were, that the graph is not at all comfortable. And as a grandmother, I feel extremely anxious to know what will the world be like for my grandchildren who will be in their 40s in 2050.
However, in California, the epicenter for investment in green technology, there is no ambiguity. Green tech is the future. I visited some of the venture capital firms putting billions into green technology. Kleiner Perkins invested in Google. It invested in Amazon. Now, it's going green.
The Industrial Revolution people look back on and they think that it was the time when mass manufacturing was created, and that's true. But really, if you look at the fundamental innovations of the Industrial Revolution, it was energy. It was fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, and oil. And now we're reaching the limits of fossil fuels in the economy for reasons that are obvious to everybody. And so fundamentally what we're doing is substituting green for brown, and that will happen over a relatively short period of time. Energy is the single largest industry in the world. Worldwide, $6 trillion. In the US alone, $1.7 trillion. And so it is a vast industry.
Michael Canalos, a respected writer on this beat, agrees that green tech is a magnet for money. However, he cautions that billions of dollars in investment does not necessarily mean quick returns. It's going to take time and effort. When it comes down to it, how are we going to know who's going to win and who's going to lose?
That's going to be tough, and it's going to take a long time. It's not like the software industry. I mean, in the software industry, you can have a company like Twitter. Twitter showed itself off at a conference about 2 years ago. Within an hour, a few thousand people had it, and within a few months, millions of people used it. This takes a lot longer. It's generally hardware. You just can't go up and download solar panels from the internet and put them up on your roof. It takes money, it takes manufacturing skills, it takes sometimes subsidies from utilities, so it'll take a while.
South of San Francisco lies Silicon Valley. It could be any boring business park anywhere in the world. In fact, it's one of the biggest innovation centres on the planet. Walk through any of these doors and you're straight into Green Tech Central. Behind this one is a remarkable solar innovation, and the CEO is an Irishman. Innovolite has devised a process which boosts solar cell efficiency by 20% over what's on the market now. The key is they have developed a liquid form of silicon, allowing solar cells to be printed by industrial screen printers.
Every major chemical company in the world today is trying to develop this type of material. Here we've done it at a small startup company here in Silicon Valley, silicon as in ink. We like to think of this as the Coca-Cola formula of the next generation of solar panels.
In July 2010, Conrad signed a major 3-year deal in China with one of the world's largest solar panel manufacturers. Not surprisingly, he's a firm believer in the potential of green technologies. To what extent is there a concern that we might prioritise certain sectors over another and find out in time that they're the wrong ones and we've backed the wrong horse?
I think the market decides. I think the key is we create the environment to allow entrepreneurs to flourish and let the market decide ultimately. And there will be failures. There'll be lots of failures, but there's nothing wrong with that. Success comes from failure, in fact. And I think the key is to allow the ecosystem to flourish. And I think with government support in certain areas, I don't think it should be in one particular area. I think it should be in a number of key areas. And the key, of course, is to pick what of those areas that should be supported. But I think, of course, there will be failures in there, but there'll also be great successes. And the key is just, let's just do it. Let's just get out there and make it happen.
What I have to find out now is, what is Ireland going to prioritise and how are we going to make it happen? The harsh reality is that in Ireland today, nearly all of our energy still comes from imported oil, gas and coal. The estimated bill is €6 billion each year. This cannot continue. The government solution is the green economy. The recession has left the public sceptical about promises of a bright green future. There's also real confusion about what terms such as the green economy and the smart economy actually mean. Despite this, Ireland is going green. Wexford Creamery is a very good example. Faced with rising bills, they set about reducing their energy costs by a series of straightforward measures.
A plant like this is very expensive to run. In our case, it's excessive of 1.5 million annually. We went around the plant, we checked what areas were being left on, we checked MCC panels to see what was required to be left on while the plant wasn't in operation. And then we decided we would automate systems to ensure that when they were not in use, that they were switched off. We cut our production schedule from 6 days to 5 days, maintaining the same production levels as previous years, and this had a huge impact on the energy consumption. We had a target of 10% in savings. We actually achieved 12% in savings, which equated to 160,000 for the year. It's definitely a win-win situation, you know, and it's going to continue within Wexford Creamery every year. I think it's going to get a little bit better, and we're going to save more money.
Across the country, companies are realising that information can deliver substantial savings. In 1 year alone, City Ireland saved more than €350,000 on its energy bill. Now it wants to increase savings even further by using new monitoring technology made by the Limerick-based firm Epicensor. Today the owner, Gary Carroll, is meeting Paul Boylan, who manages City Ireland's green initiatives.
This is the next stage in monitoring energy consumption in buildings. This is web-based software.
Right, so this is your actual savings here, is it?
Yeah.
Epicensor's wireless devices are monitoring energy use everywhere in the building.
Then over here.
Gary's sensors allow Paul to check activity on specific pieces of equipment every 30 seconds and to control energy efficiency down to a minute level.
Traditionally, a lot of the systems would tell you what's happening a day after the event. You know, this is live, it's instant, and it gives us what's going on as it happens. It's very expandable and it's wireless, so you're waiving all those setup costs.
Epicensor's technology is used in 16 countries so far, but its target market is anybody who consumes energy. A green technology with a global application is precisely the type of innovation which Ireland needs. Another company doing just that is based in University College Dublin. It's tackling the problem of waste plastic.
Ireland as a society has become very wealthy in the last 10 years, and I know we have a recession, but the amount of waste that we actually generate as a result of that economic growth is phenomenal. And so we have to do something with that waste. Sending it to landfill or exporting it to places like China isn't on. It's not sustainable. So we've got to do something. And so the inspiration for us was, can we convert that waste into something valuable and therefore create something that's environmentally friendly, that's economically viable, that will create jobs and give Ireland Inc. something new, a new direction for it to go in. It's a very simple process. We take plastic and you effectively heat that in the absence of air. And so you melt it into various like liquid products or solids and you feed that to bacteria. When they gobble up that plastic, they actually make inside themselves another plastic. And this plastic is actually biodegradable. So normally plastic will take thousands of years to degrade, but this plastic can actually degrade in 3 to 6 months in a compost. We think that the conversion of waste, and in particular waste plastics, is going to address a huge issue for our society. And so we believe that it can become a major global industry. And so through the technology that we're developing, we could imagine exporting a license to various parts of the world to actually operate this type of system industrially. So we think it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
There is no shortage of exciting new ideas in Ireland. But how do we bridge what is sometimes called the chasm of death? That is, turning a green tech idea into a viable business.
I think like any small company starting, the only true source of funding is from the marketplace. However, if a small company in Ireland is to address the global market, there's a need for initial funding to help it get off the ground. That funding is very scarce at the moment. But anybody who invests in a company like ours deserves a commercial return on investment, whether that is the government or a venture capital company.
The government says it's going to provide a €500 million fund to support just this type of innovation. Entrepreneurs say that's needed now.
The Irish government does have to step up and pony up, I suppose. You know, it has to actually say, okay, we have identified key issues in the Taoiseach's smart economy document, and the green economy is very much part of that. And so you're going to have to start investing in companies like ours to actually get them up to scale, to actually allow growth in this area.
Some economists warn that the government has to strike the right balance between funding development and protecting the taxpayer's wallet.
If the government smothers green technologies in grants and tax breaks and so forth, there will be overinvestment in those areas. There will be pass-through costs onto the rest of the economy in the form of higher electricity charges. Some of those ventures might turn out not to be viable in the long run, and you could end up with a NAMA for windmills and a NAMA for green energy.
It's not straightforward. Underinvest in Irish startup companies and you risk losing them and jobs to other countries. Invest in them and there is still no guarantee that the copyright, patent and jobs stay here.
The difficulty is, how do you trap that intellectual property that you're subsidising? So this is a complex area. It's not enough to have a motherhood and apple pie notion that something, because you labelled it green, is worth pursuing. I think there has to be much more nuanced debate about how to go about this, and I think that involves creating the culture here that's right.
Clearly, new Irish green tech companies can develop innovative solutions to global problems, but we need a better plan here to help the entrepreneurs turn ideas into products. It's only then that the jobs will be created. The green economy is not just about university startup companies and high-tech innovation. The Home Energy Savings Scheme, for example, represents a chink of light for our devastated construction industry and has helped homeowners save money.
It got a great boost in the cold snap shortly after Christmas. Our phones went off the hook. People, I think, it really brought home to people how important this thing is as they were there in a lot of snow on the ground. And if you didn't have snow on your roof and your neighbours did, it meant you weren't insulated. I think people got a whole new awareness of the importance of that, and it has continued on.
The state's target is to insulate 100,000 homes each year for 10 years. There are plans to extend this scheme. One leading economist supports the idea in theory.
I would caution there that the young builders should go back to school and the old builders should be given a job retrofitting houses. Not just any builder should be doing this. Unfortunately, the government has been very reluctant to release the economic assessment of this program, so we actually don't know how much it really costs and how much benefits it really brings, but in principle it could be a good idea.
Retraining of construction workers is just one challenge. If we are going to go with green technology projects on a grand scale, we need a workforce with the right skills.
It is quite amazing that we now are not producing the people that we most need. And in many ways, what Ireland did over the last 10 years is that it never really concentrated on widget makers, the people who actually produce value in society. We actually produced civil engineers, architects, and fundamentally went with the property bubble in many ways in professional services. But at the end of the day, commerce is a function of value creation, and value creation is fundamentally around innovation today. And a lot of talk is there about the smart economy, but there are a couple of things we have to get right. We have to absolutely endorse maths and sciences in primary school. We are not doing enough in that regard.
Yet again, thousands of students failed Leaving Cert Mathematics this year. Too many are failing science as well. The government wants to tackle the problem by amending the point system, yet unless we have maths and science at the very core of the primary school curriculum, well, the green economy may well remain a pipe dream. That's because we won't have the people to deliver it. Until quite recently, incorporating sustainable green technologies into your home was the exception to the rule. However, that is changing. A number of years ago, Rosemary and Mike Murphy decided to build a house, their aim to have an energy bill of zero.
Okay, this to us is the most important feature of the house. It's our heating system, it's a geothermal heat pump, and it combined with the solar panel gives us all of our hot water and our home heating. So we have no boiler and we have no immersion.
This house is powered by a combination of the sun through solar panels on the roof, the wind from the turbine, and the heat of the earth, which is pumped from underground.
So what's the bottom line for energy usage in this house?
We don't burn any fossil fuels at all, and combine this system with our wind turbine, that leaves us self-sufficient for energy, and hopefully we should have some left to export to the ESB.
Not everyone can build a zero-energy house. However, new technologies are on the way which will help all of us to regulate how we use energy. These technologies are why the green economy is described as a revolution, because it has the potential to affect everyone in society.
The green economy is about a sustainable future. A few years down the line, I don't think you'll be able to point to any part of our economy, even any part of our society, which will not be touched by the green economy.
The smart electricity meter is an excellent example. It's a sensor which can tell you how much electricity you're using and at what times. This will soon be extended to include gas and possibly water. Researchers in University College Dublin, Cork's Tyndall Institute and Dublin City University have been working in partnership to develop the smart meters, which will soon feature in your home.
So this is it?
This is it, Paul. So what we have is a smart meter in the house, and it logs the overall electricity consumption minute by minute. And we can get some really interesting statistics here. So for example, we can see, today that we've been using less energy than normal. How do I know that? Well, the lines here are all green. If I was to look at a previous day, for example, we can see that there are some red bars, and that means that more energy was used in those hours. When we look at this grey line here, that's a model of a person's expected usage, so it gives you a personal baseline.
So if I got this right, we're in a Dublin lab but monitoring a house in Donegal.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of smart metering, Paul.
We took one of Aidan's meters and tested it out in Rosemary and Mike's house.
You've had it for a couple of weeks. How's it going?
Good. It's interesting to see what appliances use power and how much they use compared to other appliances.
Say what would have been a surprise?
That peak there, which is the largest one of all, was the ironing.
But that's a very, very high spike. I mean, it's quite a surprise.
Yeah, much higher even than the oven, which...
We have the largest worldwide trials of smart metering ever done, currently underway in this country. And this is giving us the base and the information set from which we can then launch numerous software applications. I think we are ahead of the curve on smart metering in this country, and I think that there's great potential for us to make a huge impact on this, not just in this country, but also worldwide.
The way electricity is charged is about to change, and smart meters will be integral to that change. At the moment, electricity is charged at a flat rate, but soon rates will be set according to the time of the day. ESB, Bord Gáis and Airtricity are all monitoring the developing technology. Once introduced, they will charge the most for electricity used between 5 and 7 p.m, because that's when demand is highest. If people are using too much electricity between 5 and 7, can you give me a concrete example as to how they can not use electricity? Because otherwise it's going to seem to be simply unfair.
You could sign up to use a certain minimum amount of electricity during the 5 to 7 period. And a smart meter can be set for that. So that might allow you to, for example, use your lights, use your television, use one socket, use a kettle. And if you sort of go over that, the smart meter could trip you out. That means that if you wanted to go on a tariff like that, the technology would do it for you. You would then have to switch off something to be able to switch back in. Now, that is one example where the technology of smart metering would allow you to say, OK, here's how you can manage it. Now, what that means for the individual is you have to cook before 5 or after 7, but the technology can manage how you actually achieve it.
The ESB is spending €22 billion on green energy projects, and smart meters are a part of that. The meter should reduce the evening power surge, lowering the cost of generating electricity and therefore our bills. But the bad news is that if you continue to use a lot of electricity at peak times, regardless of your electricity provider, you will pay more for the privilege.
So if we could have major reductions in the demand between 5 and 7, we could make a much cheaper product overall. Now, I understand fully that that's difficult because that's the time people come home, people finish work. But I think there's a change needed in that space, and one of the big issues is actually knowing and seeing. And that's why I feel, particularly in the early stages, the penalty will have to be severe to make people change their habits.
With many consumers and businesses already struggling to meet bills, any kind of cost increase to deliver a green economy will be deeply unpopular.
What we can't have is to see this as some kind of panacea without clear, hard business logic brought to bear. And if it's pay taxes up front to start with, to the detriment of other businesses that are trying to survive in this society, on the hit and the hope that you'll have a green economy, then I think that is far too dangerous a proposition at this point in our economic cycle.
That investment will save money for our customers. I mean, that's our view. It certainly will also give people real choice. It will actually also give you the ability at some time in the future to be able to purchase gas day ahead at a certain rate, and then purchase your electricity day ahead at a certain rate, which you cannot do, which will give you the ability to control your bills from a price and also from a volume point of view.
If as expected the smart meter plan is passed by the energy regulator, then your current meter is going to be upgraded to a smart one. Electricity companies will have to pass on any savings to the public. Yet we as consumers are also going to have to understand how the new system works. Otherwise, we'll end up paying more. The transport sector is the fastest rising carbon emitter in Ireland. Getting people out of their cars is one of the greatest challenges of the green economy. Up to now, motorists have been hit with higher taxes, fuel costs and face potential congestion charges without any real integrated public transport alternative. One of the leading solutions is electric cars. Jerusalem has been at the centre of religious conflict for thousands of years. I'm here because I want to investigate a new revolution, but an entirely different kind. Israel's target is to convert entirely to electric vehicles by 2020. What they're calling here in Israel the electrical vehicle revolution isn't just pie in the sky. Right across the Israeli cities you'll find these charging points already in position. Very soon when you come to the mall, you won't just park your car, you're also going to charge it as well. This project will cost taxpayers billions of euro. Shlomo Volt, Israel's chief science advisor, acknowledges the difficulties of targets like these.
It can achieve only by means of a combined effort from industry, from academia, for government, and for the public support of and acceptance of those efforts. It should be a national, multi-dimensional effort in order to achieve these things. It can't be done by a single party.
Better Place, run by the Agassi brothers, is the company which the Israeli government has chosen to manage the big switch. We're in an underground car park in an industrial zone outside of Tel Aviv. What's the plan?
We're going to start with about low 10,000 cars at the end of 2011. That's for Israel. We'll go also to other countries. So we have announced on Denmark, Australia, etc. You're going to have similar numbers over there. We believe the industry is going to pick up quite fast. So we're going to have more and more cars from other car manufacturers coming into the market very, very soon. And the tipping point is going to be actually sooner than people think.
Israel can't be directly compared to Ireland. For a start, there's an intense political desire to be oil-free, and the country has both nuclear and solar power. It also has significant budget assistance from the US. However, what we can learn from their example is that in order to realise ambitious targets, there has to be leadership from the very top, and everyone has to be signed up. The move towards electric cars in Ireland is gaining momentum. Prototype cars are being tested here. Charging points are opening around the country, and all utility companies are gearing up to service the expected demand. While the cost of running an electric car is up to 20% of its petrol equivalent, they are not without problems. Existing battery technology limits journeys to 160 kilometres, and you can't forget to charge up overnight. The car companies, however, say those concerns can be overcome.
I think one of the key things that we have to do is to put customers into an EV and to have them drive it. Because when you drive it, you feel the silence, the smoothness, very easy, very pleasant to drive. And you just realize that the autonomy, the 160 kilometers, is not a problem at all. That's perfectly in line with what you do every day with a car. So basic challenge is to put people in a car and have them drive it.
The government wants 1 in 10 cars to be electric by 2020. It's signed a deal with car manufacturers to test their vehicles here. The projected advantage is that Irish software companies can work with the car manufacturers in the development of new applications, and this could create new jobs. Richard Toll disagrees.
It would be fairly unlikely that Ireland would be a centre of excellence on anything that has to do with transport. We simply do not have the tradition. We do not have the industrial strength to make a significant contribution to transport. Turning the country into an experiment, into a laboratory, is fine if that is innocent, if it doesn't cost any real money to conduct such an experiment. But in this case, we are talking about real money.
Toll sees only one way that we can make any impact on transport. We should use our expertise in agriculture and prioritise biofuels as a natural replacement for petrol and diesel.
At the moment, biofuels are made of things that humans can also eat, and therefore biofuels directly compete with food. The next generation of biofuels uses lands that cannot be used for crop production. It can even be grown out in the sea. And also the energetic properties of these fuels are probably much, much better than anything we see at the moment.
Whatever about job creation, this is the strongest push that we've ever seen for electric vehicles. The target is ambitious. The question, is it realistic?
Well, they've had a few runs at electric cars in the past, and I would say it was fair to say that the motor industry hasn't been too enthusiastic. But this time around, it's not going to stop, and for two reasons. One, the US government virtually owns the motor industry in the US, and every single car manufacturer is investing heavily in electric vehicles. So this time, it's not stoppable.
Both Renault and Nissan, we are investing 4 billion euro in the development of electric vehicles. So it's not the question of whether it will work or not, it will work.
This is one of the first real electric cars, and I can't help feeling that, like the first video recorder, like the first mobile phone, we're really at the start of something. And electric vehicles like this are going to be an increasingly common sight in the years ahead. There is no point going big on electric cars if you don't have a green and sustainable electricity supply to run them. In Arizona, a leading Irish company is blazing a trail in solar energy. NTR is benefiting from President Obama's decision to prioritise renewables.
They've done two things, I suppose. First of all, they have created the demand by mandating that the electrical utility companies actually have to have a fixed percentage of their energy coming from renewables. And if they don't, there's quite draconian penalties. And then the second thing they've done is they've created a context to create that power by putting pretty significant monies in place to allow companies like ourselves actually deploy. I think back in Ireland, you know, the issue there is just trying to get some sort of consistency around the planning process so that there's certainty that when you go with a project, you can actually, you know, you can bank it and you can fund it.
When it comes to Ireland, it's obviously looking at this expanding market and wants to try and get a piece of the action. What do you think we should be going for?
I think Ireland should look at what it has. It does not clearly have the sun, but it does have a phenomenal wind resource and a phenomenal marine resource. The government should be policies in place to allow for large-scale development. If it does that, what you'll find is that various manufacturers will go set up research and development manufacturing facilities in Ireland. There's an opportunity for Ireland to take a lead. Ireland has a choice. It can decide to be at the forefront of that and exploit the natural resources it has, or it can decide to be washed away in the waves.
Ireland has incredible natural resources. We have possibly the greatest wave power in the world. Irish companies Ocean Energy and Wavebob are engaged in pioneering work off the Galway coast and in Belmullet. If this can be commercialised, Ireland could be world leaders in the field. Indeed, Galway Bay itself is part of a major project backed by the tech giant IBM.
From an IBM perspective and from an IBM perspective in Ireland, I think we're actually at the leading edge of what's going on. There are certain projects that are emerging from Ireland where we're actually displaying thought leadership, not just to IBM, but to the world. We brought together this plethora of people and technology to develop a proposition which we call Smart Bay. So Smart Bay is really, you know, a testbed infrastructure that's going to be used to highlight Ireland's capabilities on the world stage. And, you know, about 2.5 years ago, we started talking to the Marine Institute. They had a number of buoys off the coast of Galway. These buoys were streaming data back to the Marine Institute, and their research and development scientists were going in to try and interpret this information as quickly as they could or as quickly as they needed to. So at that stage then IBM stepped in and we start working with the Marine Institute and various stakeholders in the ecosystem to connect up what was actually going on. So when you think about it, these buoys are giving us lots of information around sea condition states, nutrients in the sea, weather conditions, and so on and so forth. So if you could somehow connect all that together, you could actually make a difference for the tourism industry, you could make a difference for the fisheries industry, you could make a difference for the new emerging energy industries that are actually sort of being developed in that particular space.
Irish company Open Hydro is developing another innovative option, large-scale electricity generation from the sea floor. On land, the Spirit of Ireland project aims to generate electricity from large-scale hydro systems powered by wind turbines. All show strong potential, but the major renewable power available today is wind. The government is making ambitious targets, believing ultimately we'll be able to export the surplus to Europe's 440 million energy users. In the current financial climate, it's not a surprise that economists are demanding we closely examine the claims of government and the renewable entrepreneurs who say it has to happen now.
The green industry, if I can call it that, is a business. These are business people, they're not philanthropists. And questions have to be asked all the time, not about whether we should reduce carbon emissions. I fervently believe that we have to do that over the next 20, 30 years. I think that's going to be a dominant issue in world politics. The issue is the following. How do we reduce carbon emissions at least cost to the rest of the economy? And the wind power and wave power and other lobby groups in Ireland, biofuel lobby, have got away with murder in terms of pretending that a heavier reliance on what they're selling somehow has no costs. That's just not true, and the media haven't been sufficiently diligent in dealing with the avalanche of PR puffery from the green energy people.
Ireland's leading wind innovator is Eddie O'Connor, who started Airtricity and whose new company has wind developments around the world. He insists much of Europe's energy in the future will come from offshore turbines. He flatly rejects the charge that wind is some kind of subsidy basket case.
Can anybody tell me what price gas is going to be in 3 months? Never mind 3 years or 30 years. And I can say to anybody who would be inquiring about wind, well, I know how much wind costs now. I know how much it costs in 3 years, 6 years, 60 years. I know the cost of that. The basic fuel is free. So all you have to do is you have to accommodate the capital cost. And none of the economists, none of these people who are consulted so heavily by the government, none of these think tanks ever make the trade-off between, low capital cost for gas now and very high cost for fuel later on, and high cost to put in offshore wind now, but basically free fuel for the next 100 years. Nobody does that work.
There are problems with land-based wind power. For example, the wind doesn't blow all the time and backup from conventional stations is needed. This is why everyone is starting to look offshore, where the wind is far more powerful. As an emerging technology, there's no question that offshore wind is hugely expensive to develop and the electricity it produces costs more. However, as we have one of the greatest wind resources in the world, surely we need to be involved at the very early stages of these developments to ensure we can reap the benefits in the future. As wind power increases, traditional forms of generation will be reduced. This change is already leading to new green tech opportunities. Energy crops such as elephant grass are beginning to replace turf, for example. Forests can also contribute. A new focus on wood chips and pellets has led to 2 entrepreneurs developing a technology with global possibilities. Up to now, sawmills have had to store large amounts of logs because it wasn't possible to tell exactly how much wood they would yield. Now a company called Treemetrics has developed a technology to do just that.
Myself and Garrett were both foresters, and we knew that there was a poor system for valuing forests out there in the world of forestry.
So we developed the first system in the world which basically measures tree straightness. So generally the straighter the timber, the higher the price. We've taken a 3D camera system which we place on a tripod, put that into the forest, it takes an image, and from that image we gather the profile of about 30 or 40 trees in each position and build a profile of the trees. This is the plot information and the position of all of the trees. And if we want to look at one of those stems, We can then take a view, gives us 3D image of the stem. And here we can see the straightness of that stem, for example. Quite a lot of this technology you can find in the sawmill, but in that case, the trees have been cut. So what we tried to do is build a catalogue of log products in the forest.
The beauty of the technology is that the trees can stay in the forest until they are needed. Better for business and better for the environment. There is, however, a radical alternative to renewables. It would allow the world to continue using fossil fuels. You simply burn the coal and just bury the resulting carbon. The technology is known as carbon capture and storage, or CCS.
Ireland hasn't been to the forefront of developing carbon capture and storage, but as one of the highest emitters of carbon dioxide in Europe, well, we're certainly interested in the technology.
If it worked, the CO2 could be extracted before reaching the chimney of a power plant. It would then be transported and pumped into an empty gas field under the sea, where it would crystallise and, it's claimed, be stored harmlessly.
International efforts to attain full-scale commercial carbon capture and storage are already happening rapidly in the United States, Canada, China, and not least in Europe. I went to see the newest and largest of these facilities, which is out there in Western Norway.
Carbon capture and storage has been around for decades, but the scale of this project is awesome. There certainly seems to be momentum behind the concept.
So there are several places in the world where they do it now. 2 places in Norway, do it in Algeria. They will start doing it in Australia very soon. And in the United States, Canada, they'll be using CO2 for increased oil recovery.
And Christine works for the company that's building the plant.
We have a responsibility because we export such huge amounts of oil and gas, so that even though most of the electricity in Norway comes from hydropower, we're still largely into the carbon technology. One of the ambitions of TCM is to promote technology that is of international interest.
However, since filming, the Norwegian government has stopped funding on the plant, stating it was too complex to complete on schedule. All delays will be welcomed by environmentalists who've always been opposed to this form of CCS technology.
Carbon capture and storage, as currently promoted by the oil industry, really is a failed technology. It's not going to work in light of current climate change. It's a bit like the cigarette companies putting their filters on their cigarettes. It's trying to string the industry out a bit longer. As an environmentalist, though, I'm not against the technology in its entirety. There are environmentally sensitive forms of CCS, and these need to be explored, but certainly the current push is not in the right direction.
In terms of renewables, the most likely outcome is that Ireland will have a little bit of everything. Policies will have to change, though, as emerging technologies come on stream. Yet pursuing renewables only makes sense if you have the electricity network to handle it, and right now we don't. One of the state's most ambitious projects, the construction of the dam at Ardnacrusha, opened in 1929. At the time, it provided the entire country with electricity. In order for us to regain some of that self-sufficiency, we now have to undertake a venture of comparable scale. The project is Grid 25.
Well, the grid is the backbone of the entire power system. Grid 25 is substantially about making sure that each county and each region in Ireland has the wherewithal to attract in industry and development into those areas. And we're talking here about jobs for people in those areas. So rather than having to come to Dublin for jobs, certainly the grid will not be a barrier to development in those areas.
The grid is the primary system which carries electricity from generating stations around the country. From smaller substations, then, the electricity travels along secondary cables to your home. But it's this primary system which needs a complete overhaul.
Grid 25 is of crucial importance because we need a grid which is fit for purpose, which is going to deliver the energy, to our homes and our businesses right around the country. Instead of the old idea of a small number of large stations and a hierarchy of grid, the grid of the future is going to be something more like the internet, because we'll be sharing things, we'll be producing energy which we need to distribute. So the grid is absolutely crucial.
There's no getting around the fact that delivering the new grid system is an enormous infrastructural project. There are two options: increase the number of pylons or bury the cables underground. Both are controversial. One country which has already grappled with this issue is Denmark.
In terms of logistics, Denmark has already achieved much of what Ireland is aiming to do, and it's had to face strong opposition in the initial phase.
In Denmark, from now on, we are building no overhead lines, but only cables in the ground, except for a very large system down through Jutland that has to be the backbone of the whole Danish electricity system. That will be retrofitted as an overhead cable. It is more expensive, but it also carries some advantages. For example, with the climate change, more windy weather, you're not so vulnerable to lines that fall down and so on. Also, you can take the line through areas where you couldn't put them through else, for example, more sensible nature environments and so on.
While Denmark has chosen to go mainly underground, Ireland, after much deliberation, has chosen the overground route, and that means more pylons.
The fundamental difference between the two is one of cost. It's very much more expensive to install cable underground, but ultimately we have a responsibility to customers not to push up the price of electricity unduly. We also have responsibilities to provide a reliable power supply. If you develop a fault in the cable, it takes a number of weeks to repair the fault, whereas with overhead power lines, they can be repaired very quickly. And at the very high voltage, it is an unproven technology at the lengths that we will need to install it.
There is fierce opposition to the planned pylons. Protesters claim there will be dangerous health implications for the communities, and they want the wires buried. The strongest opposition is in the northeast, site of a critical interconnector directly linking the Republic with Northern Ireland.
To put these cables underground will be only fractions of cents per unit, and I think the people of the country will be willing to pay that small bit extra for the sake of number one, of the health of the people concerned, and of the visual impact and of the heritage of not alone Meath, of the northeast. And at the moment this is a northeast issue, but very soon this will become a national issue.
The grid upgrade has to happen, and it has to happen now. To achieve that goal, there equally has to be public buy-in. Otherwise, the process will become mired in protracted planning disputes.
The key lessons will be to engage all levels of society, planning for government and municipality level, but also to let people own shares in the turbines. Secondly, it's important to have an efficient grid. There's no way around it. So I think that will be the two main challenges.
The single most important piece of infrastructure that Ireland needs is the grid. It will make our supply more secure, less vulnerable to rocketing oil and gas prices, and allow us to sell surplus electricity back to the grid. The challenge for the government is to complete it as quickly as possible. This has been something of a roller coaster ride through the green economy, and we haven't even mentioned water supply, waste or broadband. Overriding all of this for many people is the question of employment. Minister Ryan says the green economy can create hundreds of thousands of jobs. Not so, say his critics.
I think the part of the economy in which most jobs have been created at the moment is not the green economy, it's the black economy. We're in the middle now of the worst macroeconomic crisis that we've ever faced. It's worse than what happened in the 1980s. And I think for anybody to be dreaming out loud about hundreds of thousands of jobs in a vague area, be it the smart economy or the green economy and so on, is to do a disservice to the public debate on our economic policy options. We have to try to rebuild a competitive economy that can export successfully in areas like manufacturing and in the tourism and hospitality sectors.
There's too many people looking to the government to do something, and more dramatically, the government actually deludedly believing that they can do something about it. I really worry about that type of mentality. We really just need an environment in which entrepreneurs can get on and do it.
Ireland has signed up to EU targets to drastically reduce emissions by 2020. Achieving them is going to be difficult and expensive. October's additional electricity charges are just one example. Yet the decision to go towards a green economy has already been made. The challenge is how best to do it.
Ireland has immense natural resources, its people innovative skills. What we need now is a measurable and verifiable green action plan, coordinated thinking and the determination to push it through. If we get this right, the green economy and green technologies can benefit every single one of us.